Curious Naked Diatribes. Curious Naked Diatribes. You're saying, I'm not going to pay that. This is too much to pay for a loaf of bread. I'm not going to do that. To hell with you and your $7 bread. I'll bake my own.
Yeah. This week, I sat down with my dear friend and partner in crime to talk about politics. But as you're about to hear, this isn't a typical talk about politics, with heated arguments over why such and such a candidate should be elected for such and such office. It was more a philosophical discussion about the tendency to compartmentalize politics, to think of it as something separate and distinct from your daily life. But I prefer to think of politics as something that goes far beyond who you vote for in the next election.
People's understanding of politics and what I see is their tendency to compartmentalize politics when it is, in fact, connected to every aspect of our lives. Take one day out of your life and think about things you do. Okay, you eat food. Okay, what do you eat? Do you eat meat? Are you vegetarian? Are you vegan? Why are you vegan? Why are you vegetarian? You choose those things based on, sometimes they're only health related, sometimes they're more rejection of animal enslavement and just disgusting, vile industrialization of their flesh. And who do you live with? Who do you love? That's very political. Oh, I can't get married to so-and-so. So-and-so is whatever, gay or transgender or this or that. And you're like, oh, you can't get married in the state of Alabama. All of these decisions you make on a day-to-day basis, they're all political.
You just mentioned that people compartmentalize politics, that they have their life and then there's politics.
Only this certain group of people get to talk about because they're authorized to talk about it because they went to such and such school and they studied political science, or they have a degree from Harvard and blah blah blah, or they don't, or they're in their family's in politics or whatever.
There are a lot of people that do care about what is happening in the political world, et cetera, but that is not the focus of their life. The focus of their life is their families. Sitting here in front of my house, I'm looking at this other house, and I'm watching this little child run back and forth. I think his parent ran after him in the opposite direction. That's people's focus. Right there, as typical evening in a typical American home, you're thinking about your kids, getting them to bed. Did they eat enough? How well did they do? And so it's not so much that people are feeling like it's some elitist, it's that most people, and he hates it when I make that statement.
I do.
But I'm looking at the neighborhood, and here are most people in this neighborhood, but this neighborhood represents most neighborhoods in the state, and in the next state, and then the next state, there's neighborhood after neighborhood, suburban development after suburban development, filled with homes and families who are caring about one thing, their family. Here's this, the political thing is compartmentalized because they have their families and what's immediately in front of them. Then you're wanting them to care about what's on television as if that should be as important to them as what is right in front of their faces.
Well, how much time do you put into work? How much time is required to take care of a family? That is very political as well. But people tend not to make that, well, I shouldn't even say that because...
That's interesting. What do you mean by that? That's interesting.
Well, you need a job, right?
Right.
You need both parties working, usually, right?
Usually.
If you have
in today's economy, yes.
A child, much less 2 or 3, your housing, your food, your this, your that, your la 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 la. So, if you don't have enough time, why is that? It's not like that in other countries, and it's not like that in many places. Well, Europe is kind of changing, but, historically, there's more of an emphasis. You want to talk about families, emphasis, and people wanting to care about families.
Yes.
You get time with your family.
Off. What is somebody supposed to do? Why don't they see that everything they do is political? That they're buying that loaf of bread at the store is political? And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? My buying bread at the store is political. Give me a break.
No, you're baking bread at home. Growing your own food, growing your own garden, having your own vegetables. I mean, that's like...
But, dear Jason, I would have never put the two together, thinking that my singular act of baking a loaf of bread was political in any way until tonight.
Well, it's sort of an act of resistance, right?
I never would have thought of it that way, especially when you raised both your middle fingers and said, it's a fuck you to the man.
Well, whoever's making money from all the grocery store chains, who's the guy? Who's the Kroger guy? Who's the big man? Who's sitting on top of that pile of cash?
People, they bake bread for all kinds of reasons, because it's the loving thing to do, because their bread tastes better, because it's healthier, it's not chock full of toxins and preservatives, and or they can make their own spelt, they can make their own gluten-free, yada, yada, yada. But in all those cases, I really doubt one person, one mom, one dad, one aunt, one grandma thinks, I'm making a political statement by baking my bread.
Whether they acknowledge it as such or not, I think it is. Well, like I said, it's an act of resistance. You're saying, I'm not going to pay that. This is too much to pay for a loaf of bread. I'm not going to do that. To hell with you and your $7 bread. I'll bake my own.
Yeah.
You can extrapolate on all kinds of other things, like it's like whether it's like, maybe it's not bread, maybe it's like
artichokes.
I don't know. Well, I mean, going beyond the food analogy, it's basically taking back your own agency. All this great land of ours, this United States, it's a bunch of land, right? I mean, just think about every year, how many farmers are just like kicked off, forced to sell, because, whoever owns that land, they want a little more.
And now I invite you, challenge you, dear listener, to think of how something that is very near and dear to you may in fact be political. On this podcast, I'm going to present a range of subject matter that at first might not seem relevant at all to your life, but I think that upon further reflection and investigation, you may find it to be very relevant, perhaps in unexpected ways. In future episodes, you'll likely hear about things you might not have had a chance to think about before. Some of them may even require you to examine some of your core beliefs. But in the end, if you stay with me on this journey, I think you'll find it well worth the time.
Javi Media.